Well, hello, everyone. We're really glad to have you here wherever you may happen to be listening in from. We're really glad that you're listening to Unstoppable Mindset. I'm your host, Michael Hingson, and our guest today is Tricia Copeland. Tricia is a prolific author. I use that word absolutely without any concern. A prolific author of children's books, especially in the fantasy world. So she has been doing this a while, and also has an interesting story just of her life to tell. So we're going to go into all of that and delve in and see where we go. So Tricia, I want to welcome you to Unstoppable Mindset. We're really glad you're here.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate you having me. And I do want to make a little edit to that intro.
Okay, go ahead.
My books are young adult to new adult books, so ages 13 plus mostly.
All right, so young adult to new adult. All right, that's fair. So how do you feel that your books fall into the range of things like the Harry Potter series and so on? Sort of
Definitely,
the same age
ge-
groups?
right, genre adjacent. I have a series, the Kingdom Journal series, which includes three witches that have to break a curse on the witch lines. So the witches have to find each other as well as figure out how to break the curse using various forms of magic. So not really the same as Harry Potter, but
No,
definitely with the witches and the kind of contemporary world that Harry Potter is.
but
Actually, I won't say that because I think Harry Potter is mostly in the contemporary world, right? I didn't read all the books, I have to admit that.
yeah, he's somewhat in the contemporary world. But I was thinking more of from a standpoint of the same type of age group.
Yes, I think a younger reader, I think people started reading Harry Potter maybe around 10 or 11. And these books have older teenagers to start, age 17, 18. So 13 plus is a good indicator, I think.
The other thing I would observe about Harry Potter is that there are a lot of people who aren't necessarily teenagers or young adults, including me, who have read them and enjoyed them. I think that Harry Potter certainly brought an interesting dimension to reading for teenagers, especially, and hopefully young adults, because a lot of people did catch on to them, and they had a great theme. And you do some of the same sorts of things by virtue of the fact of what you're writing and who you're writing it for.
Right. They definitely caught adult eyes and hearts and minds too.
Well, tell us somewhat about the early Tricia growing up and so on. Love to learn a little bit more about you, and then we can talk about whatever we feel is relevant to talk about. So tell us
Okay.
about the early Tricia.
Right. Well, I grew up in rural South Georgia, small town in South Georgia, and always loved reading and hiking and the outdoors. And very quickly knew that maybe I didn't want to be in a small town forever. So I went to college in Atlanta and I got a degree in microbiology. And from there, I got a master's degree and I started my career in central research and development at a chemical company, a large chemical company. So I was looking at making chemicals from microbes. And that was very exciting. That was my dream job that I'd always wanted. So that was very cool to be able to achieve that goal. And I actually didn't like writing until I started doing more technical writing with papers and patents.
Technical writing can be boring, but people could make it more exciting than oftentimes they do, I would say. I've had to do
I
some
guess,
of it, I understand.
well, you have to like the topic, right? If you don't
Yeah,
like the topic, you're not going to like the paper.
right, right. But also, I think that a lot of technical writers write, and it's all very factual, but I think even in technical writing, it would be better if writers could do some things to draw in readers. And I've always felt that about textbooks. For example, my master's degree and bachelor's degree are in physics. And I've always maintained that the physics people who write these books, who are oftentimes fairly substantial characters in the genre, if you will, or in the field, could do a lot more to interest people in science and physics by rather than just doing these technical books, telling some stories along the way and bringing people in and making people relate more to the topic. And they don't do that like I think at least that they should.
I guess that can be said maybe for every technical um,
Yeah,
area.
yeah. It would be nice if technical writers spend a little bit of time. But of course, then the other side of it is that the industry doesn't want that. So what do you do?
It may be a catch-22 on that one.
Might be, but that's okay. So, how long did you stay working at at the chemical companies and so on?
I was in the lab for 4 years and then I moved into the patent legal group. So
Hmm.
I began my career as a patent agent. And now that's what I do for a living. My day job is that I help clients draft and file their patent applications.
So you have your own business doing that.
I do, yes.
Ooh,
So
well,
I write
that
by day and I write by night.
yeah. Well, that can be pretty exciting, though. Um,
It is. Yes,
you get all sorts of interesting things to write about.
I do. I meet a lot of cool people that are inventing cool things.
So here's the question: do you ever find that what you write about during the day influences you, and you want to use some of that or the general concepts of some of that at night when you're doing your fiction writing?
I haven't done that yet. I did write one dystopian fiction about a viral pandemic, and that touched on a little bit of my background in microbiology and genetics,
Hmm.
but not anything that my clients have done.
Well, so you got into the patent field when you started doing that initially. Were you doing it for a company, or did you just leap out on your own and start to have your own business?
Yes, I was doing that for a company.
Okay, and how long did you do that?
I was at that company about a year and a half, and at the time we lived in Pennsylvania in outside of Philly.
Mm.
So then we had a job change and we moved to Denver. So I took a little time off to be with my kids before I started my business.
So, how long ago did you start the business?
In 2012, so
Oh,
13
you've
years
been
ago.
doing it a while. Wow.
Yeah,
Okay. And obviously, you're having some success because you're still doing it.
I am. Yes, I love helping my clients and feel like I can definitely give them a value add.
If you're not giving something away, what's probably the most interesting patent that you helped somebody work on attaining?
I will say I worked with an inventor a year ago, and amazing man. He had had his career in education and teaching, and he developed a set of blocks to help people, or help kids, I should say, learn the parts of speech. So you could put the together the blocks, whether it was a subject, verb, pronoun, noun, adjective, adverb, and I learned parts of speech that I never knew existed from helping him with this application. And I was very excited to help him get his patent.
That's kind of cool. Um, yeah, I'm not sure I know all the parts of speech, but I remember being involved in high school and in elementary school and diagramming sentences and learning a lot about the different or a number of the different parts of speech. Um, Not sure I necessarily remember all of them extremely well, so I probably split infinitives. And well, what do you do?
Yes, I hated sentence structure. So
Yeah. Well, so what got you started then, since you were writing patents for people and so on and helping people in securing patents? What got you then started in dealing with fiction writing?
right. Well, when my kids were very young, I was a stay-at-home mom, and most of my days were spent chasing them around, occupying them, entertaining them, shuttling them from one place to another. So I realized in the evenings I was bored. My mind didn't have enough to occupy it. And I was I think it was about 38 and, looking at my 40-year-old birthday and thinking, well, and I maybe it was like my 20-year high school reunion. I don't know why it coincided, but I started thinking about my early college years. I developed anorexia and thinking about that time in my life and how poignant it was that I was able to recover from that disease and really
Mm,
gain some life skills from that experience. So I started a story that was a fictionalized account of my experience with anorexia and recovering from anorexia. So my first series, called the Being Me series, is a 4-book series about a character named Amanda who develops anorexia and then is able to recover.
so what caused, if you understand, or and I don't know a lot about anorexia, and probably have some misconceptions about what I'm about to ask, but what caused it? Why did you develop that condition?
Well, there are a lot of, I mean, it happens differently for a lot of people. I think anorexia is a lot about control and having control over your environment.
Mm,
And there was a number of factors that I was depressed and not happy about, not feeling like I was achieving maybe what I should be achieving. And instead of someone might have turned to alcohol or drugs to alleviate those stressful feelings, I channeled all that into, okay, well, if I'm just thin and if I just look good enough, then everything will be fine.
mm,
And obviously, once your brain starts to get in that cycle, it just compounds on itself. You can't stop yourself from thinking that way.
yeah. And what helped you get out of doing that? Was it writing, or what really caused you to realize that ain't the way to go?
Yeah, I almost died. That was it.
Well,
It
that'll
was
do it.
yeah, it was a low point, and really, if I didn't do something different, if I didn't let people help me do something different, I would not have made it. So
You said,
really, a lot of that is like educating people of how serious eating disorders are, as well as how helpless sometimes the person that is experiencing them is in being able to help themselves.
and you said that this happened somewhat in your college years.
Yes, I was 20.
Hmm. Were there a lot of pressures? Were people criticizing you in any way that helped contribute to it, or was it sort of really
I think
internally?
part of it was internally, part of it was, what I thought people's expectations.
Mm,
I was at an engineering school and I was a biology major, so maybe that wasn't the best place for me. Everybody was very high performing. Um, yeah, there were many, many factors, I think,
yeah.
in just my brain that was not processing things maybe as realistically as they could have been processed.
But what you eventually did about it was to write a series about it. So clearly, um, you were able to move beyond it and then, if you will, talk about it.
Right, right. So I went into inpatient recovery and then was able to get the help that I needed with therapists and psychiatrists and support groups, and that was a big help. And then, yes, 20 years later, I wrote a series about it.
Well, that's pretty cool. And again, it's I'm always one who admires people who are able to and willing to talk about things. I went to an event last year, was the Marshfield, Missouri Cherry Blossom Festival. And the Cherry Blossom Festival, which happens every April, is a celebration of American history. And they'll bring people in who have some relationship to an historic event, or who have relatives who were. So, for example, the great grandson of President Grant was at this event. But one of the people who was there was a former Secret Service agent who rode in the car behind John Kennedy when he was in Dallas and assassinated. And it took him 45 years to get to the point where he could come out of his experiences enough to start to talk about it. And I just have always admired people who do that. For me, being in the World Trade Center on September 11th, and getting out, I never really viewed it as all that traumatic, but I guess it was. But My way to deal with it was, and I realized it much later, but we had so many newspaper reporters who wanted to know about the blind guy who got out of the World Trade Center. I talked about it and answered everyone's questions. And that was ironically, I love to pick on the media, but ironically, it was the media that really probably helped me move forward from September 11th the most.
Yeah, I can imagine that was a lot of processing that you were able to do as you talked about it.
People asked all sorts of questions, some really good questions, some not so good questions. And we got to observe all sorts of different types of press people. We had one Italian film crew who came to our house. There were 13 people, most of whom didn't really seem to do a whole lot, but they were there. And then there was a Japanese crew that came, and I think there were two people. It's just amazing what you see and what you learn. And for me and my wife both, now my late wife, but both of us loved to observe and study and really think about what all these people are doing and how they do it, and we use it as ways to help us learn more about things, if you will. Studying and being a student, I think, of life is always an important thing.
Right. Yeah. And I guess everybody reacts different to trauma and how you can process that. Everybody needs a little bit different. But yes, if you could look at things through a learning lens, that can definitely help too.
So you wrote the Being Me series. How many books are in that series?
4 books.
Four books. Okay. And so how long ago did you write those?
I published them between 2015 and 2016.
Okay. Did you self-publish or?
I do. Yes.
Uh-huh. You still do. Okay, great. Well, all right. And then what what made you decide to then continue and start going into sort of teenage and so on, fiction and fantasy and so on?
Right. I realized that I just loved writing and it was something that I didn't want to stop doing. So when I looked around for my next genre to write in, it was very obviously fantasy for me. I read fantasy from a very young age. I loved Merlin and King Arthur's
Yeah.
Legends and The Lord of the Rings and all of those books as a young person and a young adult. And that's just what I wanted to write. So my first book, interestingly enough, my editor sent it back to me and said, "This is not fantastical enough. You need to make it more paranormal." So
Mm.
it took a minute to make that switch.
What book was that?
That is Drops of Sunshine, and it is mirrored off an experience I had. I was a camp counselor at a camp for the blind when I was in, I guess, after my freshman year of college. And the campers in my story have these extrasensory skills where they can read people's minds. That was the paranormal aspect of my book. And that's not known in the beginning of the story to our main character. And then she discovers that these kids have this special talent. And that was how my fantasy books started out.
Mm-hmm. Then where did it go from there?
Then I jumped into The Witches with the Kingdom Journals series. I developed a character that was a vampire or is a vampire witch hybrid. And so she has a vampire mother and a witch father, but she doesn't know who her father is. She's never met him. And to make things a little bit harder, vampire witch hybrids are not allowed by either the witch lines or the vampires. So both the vampires and the witches got together and said, these beings are too dangerous. We're not going to allow them in our society. And if she's discovered, then she'll be killed.
Mm.
That
That's
was
not
the
very.
first character, Alina. And to give her just a little more stress, I put her in a human high school. So now she pretends, can't pretend to be a witch, can't pretend to be a vampire. She needs to be human too. And yeah, so that was a really fun book to write. And that's the series where the Trinity of Witches has to come together. So she has to find the other two witches of the Trinity And they each get to tell their story in the books too. So that's why it's called the Kingdom Journals. It's a little bit of a journal format. So each character gets to tell their own story, as well as telling the overall plot line of the series.
How do you come up with these characters and create these stories? I mean, it's very imaginative. I wouldn't have thought of it. How do you, and I'm sure other people say that, but how do you create the characters? How does all that work?
Yeah, I set out, funny enough, I set out to write a vampire series. That was my vampires, my favorite fantasy characters. And I thought, okay, I'm going to write a vampire series. It's not, and you don't want to do it too far out from what most people write or most people think of vampires, but I wanted my vampires to be a little bit different from the other vampires in other series. So I had this idea of making the vampire witch hybrid and her set in a human high school and what would that look like. And then the challenge, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with the challenge, but somehow I came up with this curse, and the curse was on the witch line. So it very quickly morphed into more of a witch book and the magical side of things. But the vampire characters are still there, and I explore them a little bit, although not as much as the witches.
Hmm. Do you find that the characters essentially tell you what they want to be and who they are and why they do what they do? How much are the characters involved in your writing process? I've heard other authors say that in some of the fiction things, the characters really create the story.
They do. I feel like my books are very character driven. So, how I usually start with the idea for a character and think of their personality, their challenges, what I want, what themes I want to show with that character, and then build the world sort of around that character so it shows those themes and those character traits and what they're overcoming either in their personal life or in their physical life, right? But I do
And
have characters that go off script. In the second book, Kingdom of Darkness, I have a character who we're not sure if he's a good guy or a bad guy. The main character thinks that he may be trying to delude her into thinking he's good when he's not really good. But I wrote him so well, like he was so nice that I couldn't make him a villain. So he became I rewrote the story a little bit. I'd written it in my mind, I guess, but I rewrote it a little bit. So he did end up being a villain. And then somehow he got his whole own book. So he gets to star in his whole book after that.
does he stay a villain?
No, he didn't stay, he didn't, was never, I mean, I kind of wrote it so the main character thought he was a villain, but in the end,
Ah,
I didn't make him a villain.
well, I like books like that. I think that most creatures are generally pretty nice. Uh,
We would hope so.
Although I don't know that bears necessarily are overly generally nice to people, but who knows?
Yeah,
That
I'm
doesn't mean
still,
they're evil either.
well, no, yeah, I mean, they're just living their life, right?
Yeah.
They need their food sources as just like we need our food sources, so.
I'd rather not be their food source though, but that's okay.
Right. Yeah, and I don't know, I do struggle with like evil or antagonistic characters because I don't like the idea that there's a character that is purely evil for no reason. So that's always a grapple in an author's mind, I think.
Well, and I'll go back to Harry Potter, and of course we have Lord Voldemort, who was definitely evil. Um, but even so, the way she created the characters and the way she crafted the books, which probably in some ways are similar just in the process of what you do, it's not necessarily overly graphically evil. Even if there's evil, it isn't so graphic that you 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 become totally adverse or against it. Evil or bad things are there, but it's all on how you present it. And that's why I like books that are essentially puzzles, if you will, because they leave a lot of things to your imagination and they give you the ability to, as a reader, think about it. But as a writer, you also are essentially drawing the reader into where you want the reader to go. But they're puzzles rather than just some graphic thing talking about all these horrible, mean, nasty things that a character may do.
That's true. And it's all perspective, right? So the quote unquote villain in my series is out to destroy all the vampires. But then you meet vampires that are good vampires, right? And you think, huh, well, maybe this one vampire shouldn't be destroyed because this vampire is not acting in a mean or hurtful way. So many sides to those questions.
Yeah. Well, so the Kingdom series, how many books are in that one?
There are 4 books in the main series, and there's a prequel to that series.
Okay. And then what happened? What happened after that series?
So in the finale, Kingdom of War, my witches were going to have this huge battle against a vampire army that the evil witch created to, battle
Yeah.
the good witches.
Yeah.
She put witch souls in the vampires, so that made them sort of like super vampires. But anyway, my witches needed an army, and I thought, who would be a good character to have an army that can come help the witches? So
Yeah.
the beings I thought of were fairies, and I created a queen, Titania is her name, who had an army who would come help the witches battle these vampire witch soul hybrid beings.
Mm-hmm.
And when I created her, she just kind of took on her own character. And I quickly that into what was her backstory, what were her struggles, where was she living, where would this Fae army come from? And that is what kind of launched my Realm Chronicles series that the finale is coming out next month.
Hmm. Well, that's pretty cool, and that answers again the question we talked about earlier. The character actually took over, if you will, the writing, which is always cool because that really shows how deeply you're invested in the characters, and you let them have their voices.
Right. And I couldn't really give up the characters from my Kingdom Journal series. They not to, not to give too much away, but they do
No,
complete their first quest. But this evil witch who's trying to destroy the vampires is still out there somewhere. So I couldn't completely let them go. So the witches from my Kingdom Journal series come into the Realm Chronicles series, and the fairies and the witches are continuing to help each other.
well, that's cool. Well, it's kind of neat to, even though it's a new series, and I assume you can read one without reading the other, but still, it's neat that you follow on and help to craft and expand the world.
It's been a lot of fun. Selfishly, I didn't want to let go of the characters. I felt like they had a little bit of story left in them, and I was able to do that through the Realm Chronicles series. And yeah, it was a lot of fun for me to write.
And now, of course, the question is, will there be a lot more story with them, which is part of the adventure that will come next, right?
Yes, I'm thinking of that. I put my characters through a lot. So after I finished the finale, I felt like I just had to let them rest. I'm not really sure if I will continue with those same characters or either pull out some different characters from that book to have their own stories.
Yeah, well, it's it's going to be an adventure, no question about it.
Definitely.
So, um, with your books, do you have themes in your books? That is, are you trying to convey messages? Do you have themes and things that you want people to think about as they go through reading your books?
I do. I feel like I like that in a book. And so I kind of embed that in my books too. But it's really more about what is the character grappling with, not only, like I said, in their physical world. Maybe Queen Titania is the first female queen in her realm, and some of the old guard, other monarchs, are not sure that a female should be able to rule. So that's sort of an outside challenge, but she also has inner conflict and challenges where she's not really trusting that she really can do it and she's really supposed to do it. And should she, hand the crown to someone else who may be older or wiser, or and so does she have faith in herself, would sort of be that theme there. And so each of the books has, I mean, it's not like I say, hey, the theme of this book is you need to believe in yourself.
Yeah.
but but just showing that the character arcs and how they overcome their challenges.
How do you again create those? How do you work those in? What's the process that allows you to put those themes in and add them to the book and bring that value out?
Right. I guess it's just how the way the
The way you
challenges I
think.
choose to put in front of my
Hmm.
characters and showing them fail at times and showing them. I do write first person, so you're getting a very up close view of what the character is thinking and feeling at all times. So I think that helps with a little bit of that, knowing that the character is struggling with whatever their XYZ inner turmoil that they're struggling with. And then, just having other characters bounce things off of them because the character themselves might not realize, hey, I get anxious when I'm not in control of situations. So, somebody might say, hey, you're doing this again, stop.
Hmm. That's why we have editors
Right.
and other people to help. Well, so but you clearly talk with your characters and you let them have a voice, which is, I think, something that adds a really great dimension to the writing that you do. And I think it's very important to do that.
I hope so. I have very detailed character sheets for each of my characters. I create much bigger backstories than probably that really makes it into the books, just to be able to know like how my characters will react in situations, what their growth needs to be, where areas that I want to show that growth, and what's most important in their values, and how would they react to all the different challenges.
Hmm. What caused you to bring fairies into it? Again, I think that's pretty imaginative. You were writing about witches and vampires, and fairies are different. How did that come about?
Honestly, I was at a book event and a person was walking around with these postcards, and they were trying to get authors to write a short story for an anthology, and it had to be a fantasy genre and it had to be a character with a mental health challenge. But the image on the postcard was of a fairy, and she was hunched in a meadow in these grasses, and she looked kind of anxious or scared, maybe even a little timid or worried. And I thought, oh, that's a cool image. It was very striking with the green grass and her fairy wings. And just her eyes were like, had just a lot of feeling behind them. So it caught my eye. I never thought I'd write about fairies. I was looking for the army for my witches. And I thought, well, the fairies could be like the characters the witches go to. So it
Hmm.
was just kind of happenstance that I happened to see this fairy character on a postcard and think, I could, the fairies could be the answer.
And it turns out they were.
They were, yes.
So are all fairies girls?
No,
Okay.
I mean, fairies are much like humans in my world, except that my fairies have wings.
Yeah,
They
that's
live
fine.
in Middle Earth, which is
Ah.
just below our Earth. So they share our same bedrock. It kind of mirrors our Earth in my world. And they have rings where they can come back and forth between the Fae and the human realm. And they live in our contemporary times. I like those themes of there might be witches, there might be vampires, there might be fairies that walk alongside us every day and we don't know it.
And do they know Bilbo Baggins since we're talking about Middle Earth? Just checking.
They do. Well, they might have read the book. I don't know that they met him personally.
Yeah, well, that's, another story. But it's cool. What other kinds of characters are you thinking of for maybe future books outside of witches, vampires, and fairies?
Right. So I won't give too much away, but
No.
in order to perform some of the spells that they need to perform, I guess in two of my books in this series, To Be a Fae Legend, which is the third book of the series, and To Be a Fae, which is the finale, the last book of the series. My witches and fairies need to perform these spells, so they need a great amount of power or energy, and they have to assemble different kinds of beings. And in the finale, they have to assemble 12 different kinds of beings. If you
Mm,
try to make a list of different kinds of beings, you actually, and ones that the witches and the fairies could find in the human realm. Like, so I had an elf and the werewolves and Nyx and Selkies. Like, so the Nyx are shapeshifters that shift into fish. And then the Selkies are shapeshifters that shift into, oh, now I'm blanking. Not walruses, seals, sorry.
mm.
So yeah, I had to go find all these different characters. So all of those characters are in this final book, and I'm thinking of maybe some of those characters that can form a new series.
So are all trolls mean, nasty creatures, or do you know yet?
In my series, they are depicted as that, yes.
How about gnomes?
I don't have any gnomes.
Well, there's another one for you to look
There
at
you
down the
go.
line. Might be interesting to see where that goes, of course.
Yep.
So you but you have a variety of characters, and I think it's great when you have a rich culture of a lot of different characters. And of course, there are all sorts of potentials for conflict or for different creatures to learn to work together too.
Right. The Fae historically have not worked with other beings or creatures. They very much kept to themselves and had primary purpose. They think their primary purpose is to protect the humans from all the evil spirits. So that has been their focus historically, and they've shunned other groups of beings based on whether they thought they were descended from the creator, who is sort of like their god,
Mm-hmm.
or the creator, or the evil one, right? So the Fae believed that the vampires and werewolves, for instance, were created by the evil one, so they shouldn't associate with those types of beings. And there's a lot of learning in there, I guess you could say, of it. Are we going to partner with these beings, and what does that look like, and is that really okay? And can we choose a different path than what our predecessors have chosen?
And I guess it sort of pretty clearly is that they somewhat do that.
Yes, they do. And Titania, our main character, is very much the herald for that type of behavior and that type of community and that type of acceptance.
Well, so um, your book will be out in July, and then where do you go from there?
Yes, so like I said, I'm tossing around ideas for fantasy characters. I also write in the romance genre. So generally, I'll write a fantasy and then I'll write a romance. I'll switch back and forth between writing those. The past year and a half, I guess I've been focusing on finishing this fantasy series. So I have two romances now queued up that I'm excited about writing, and we'll get to those first, I think.
Hmm. What romances have you written already?
So after the Being Me series, I started the Perfect Romance series, which the first book was a little bit different from a typical romance. It has 5 parts, and it's the same main character, but based on decisions at different times in her life goes off in a different way. So you see her go to France and fall in love with a French man, or you see her take a job in New York City and fall in love with a investment banker. And so you see her in different stages of her life, having made different decisions, but still finding a happily ever after. So that kind of kicked off that, and somebody called it speculative romance at one
Hmm.
time. And it's
Okay.
more like make your own story or choose your own ending type of book. But from there, I initially thought I would write like a full book showing each of the happily ever afters with that same character. But I wrote one book showing one happily ever after scenario, but then decided that I would look at all of her friends' lives. So they all met in college and they were in this one sorority together. And so I write different books showing the different friends' love stories. So I've written Perfect was the first one, Perfect Always with Chloe. And then Bree's book is as close to perfect. And this is still set in Lexington, Kentucky. And then the last one was Perfect Office Pact, which is a enemies to lovers office romance.
Hmm. Now, do you put a lot of sex in your books?
I don't. No, my books
Okay.
are what's called closed door or fade to black. So you'll see some kissing, but not much more than that.
And that's fine. And the reason I asked that question was to get to the whole issue of so many people, when they're writing, just have to make everything so graphic. There's got to be all this sex and all this other stuff that they put in them. And my view has always been, is that really necessary? And I gather you're essentially saying the same thing. And again, it's like detective stories. I love to read a lot of detective stories, but I like the detective stories most that are puzzles. That is, I want to figure out who done it. I don't need all the graphics of how somebody got murdered or what happened. It happens. You don't need to put all that graphic stuff in to get to dealing with the puzzle. And it's the same thing with sex. You really need all that. Like a lot of comedians, it's all the shock stuff. They got to have all these horrible words, swear words, and everything else. But the best comedians, I think most people, if they really study it, will agree, are the ones that tell stories without all that dirty and sex stuff in it.
And that's what I like to read and what I like to watch too. But there are definitely people that enjoy different types of books.
Yeah,
So
there are.
yeah.
Yeah, I hear you. But I would prefer to be able to use my imagination in various things. So one of my favorite detective stories or characters of all times is Nero Wolfe, written by Rex Stout, um, because he writes in a way where you don't see all the graphic. And don't need to see any of the graphic to get the entire picture. He describes enough so you know what's going on, but he doesn't deal with it in a way that would, how do I put it, offend anyone.
Right. And I would
Which I,
probably argue that mystery books are would be the hardest to write, I think, because you have to give enough clues throughout so that the reader doesn't think, oh, I would have never thought that was the villain, but you don't want to put too much in so it's so obvious who the villain is, right? So I think it's the way those authors weave those stories are very intricate and thought out and multi-layered and impressive to me.
well, and the reality is that sometimes, and again, I'll use Rex Stout as an example, when you find out who did it or who the bad person was, and Wolf explains it, clearly all the clues were there, but it would be really hard for you to put it together. Now, there have been
Right.
a few times where there were things that he didn't tell you that if he had said those during the book, you might have figured it out. But mostly the the clues are somewhat there, but it is so subtle that I doubt very many people would figure it out, which is what
And those
makes
are
it
the
so
best
much fun.
ones,
Yeah,
right? Yeah, definitely.
it makes it so much fun when that happens.
It is.
So you're still deciding what you want to do for your next series of books, or what the next realm will be, if you will.
In the fantasy genre, yes, I'm still deciding which way to go with my next characters. Yes.
Right. But you're going to probably do some romances before you go into those.
I am, yes. I was just writing a newsletter to my subscribers. In the last book, I had subscribers pick names for my characters, And so in this book, I thought, you know what? I don't like this character has only been introduced and very briefly in one of the books. And so she doesn't have a lot of backstory. And I thought, you know what? I can just ask my readers, where do you think she should live? What are her hobbies? What does she like to do? What's her favorite book genre? I thought that would be a lot of fun for my readers to direct some of that.
And what kind of answers did you get? Did you get a lot of feedback?
Oh, like I said, well with the names one so I just sent out the poll today
Okay.
for the new one. But for the ones, yeah, I got like 100 answers, and it
Wow.
was and then I thought, next time I won't do the names because sometimes names are so personal and can evoke like a lot of emotion that people get very heated about people's names.
Yeah. Now, do mostly women answer, or do you get both sexes answering your
It
questions?
is mostly women, but definitely maybe 10% male, I would think. And actually, I feel like I have more interaction, and that's mostly on the fantasy side, but I
Hmm.
feel like I actually have sometimes more interaction, and maybe, I don't know, maybe they just get more passionate about the fantasy.
Yeah, probably so. But there's something to be said for reading a good romance book. I like cozy mysteries as well, and a lot of those are really combinations of mysteries and romance. And the mystery part is oftentimes more straightforward, but it's just the whole book and the putting the entire book together that makes it so much fun.
Yeah, those can be a quick, kind of feel good read. I
Yeah,
for that genre. Yeah.
and there's nothing wrong with that. It's good to have feel good books occasionally too.
I am all for feel good everything.
Yeah. Well, when I travel, I like to read on airplanes, and I like not to work and do reading that's really related to work, because going and coming from events is really the time that I get to have the most downtime. Once I get somewhere, I am on until I am on the airplane coming home. And so it is the way to relax. So I enjoy reading things that will allow me to relax when I'm going and coming from trips or from events, which is so important, I think, to be able to do. And I think people should do more of that. It's always worth slowing down some and really letting your mind just wander.
Yeah, plane trips are my favorite because I do the same thing. I read on the plane and I listen to audiobooks mostly if I'm
Hmm.
home, when I'm exercising or when I'm doing chores. But to be able to sit down and read doesn't happen that often.
What do you like to read most from audiobooks? What genre?
Exactly what I write, fantasy and
Okay.
romance.
What's your favorite fantasy books?
I just finished, and I'm so behind because I don't read fantasy when I'm writing fantasy. So I just finished Holly Black's The Folk of the Air series, The Cruel Prince. Um, I think The Cruel Prince, The Wicked King, and The Queen of Nothing. I think they're the three books in that series. So that was a
Mm.
really good series. And I'm reading Emily's Wild Encyclopedia of Fairies right now. So I just started that.
Get a little bit more information on those fairies for a future book.
Right.
That's that's kind of important to do. So, do you produce with? I've asked a number of people this, and I'll ask you: do you arrange for audiobooks to be produced from your series?
I do. Both my fantasy series, the Kingdom Journals, as well as the Realm Chronicles, I have audiobooks for. I'm a little bit behind in the Realm Chronicles. My narrator had some health problems, so I'm switching narrators. But my new narrator, Tina Wollstonecraft, yes, I think that's how you pronounce her last name. She will be working on the fourth book in the Realm Chronicles series in September. So I'm hoping that will come out in October, and that will be my eighth audiobook.
And where can people get the audiobooks?
So the Kingdom Journal series is on all platforms, and then the Realm Chronicles series, the newest series, is on Audible.
Okay. So, and again, under your name for the author?
Yep, Tricia Copeland, author. The Kingdom Journal series, the first two books are female character. So, and now I'm blank. I can't believe I'm blanking on her name. Um, It'll come to me in a minute. Yeah, so I had a female narrator for the first two books, and then the second two books are male lead main characters. So Dan Delgado did the narration on those.
Hmm.
And then Jillian Yetter, who was the most amazing narrator for Titania. She even had pink hair, just like
Ah,
Titania does. I'll hold up the cover of the book has Titania's pink hair. So that was really fun to work with her. And we won an award for the second book in that series to be a Fae Guardian in audiobook.
oh, cool. What was the award?
It was Independent Book Publisher Association Young Adult Fantasy Silver Award.
Oh, cool. That's exciting. It's always good to have awards. Have you run other awards along the way?
I have several Colorado Independent Book Publishers Association for the first book, Kingdom of Embers, in the Kingdom Journal series, as well as several the Global Book Awards for to remember to be a to be a Fae Queen, which is the first book in the Kingdom Journals, and Azrea, my Aztec mythology.
Hmm. So, how many books have you written altogether?
Next month's book will be 23.
Wow. That is really exciting. Well, and I know we're putting in the show notes the picture of the book cover for the next book. And as I mentioned earlier, if you want to send us other books that you think people ought to read, we'll put those pictures in the notes as well. I'm glad to have all the pictures you want to share.
I will definitely share them. Thank you.
Well, so is there anything else you'd like all of our listeners and viewers to know or to think about going forward?
Right. Well, if you go to my website, which is triciacopeland.com,
And Tricia
you
is Tricia, Copeland,
L-E-N-D. Right.
COPELAND.com.
.com. Yeah. So if you go there and if you just want to get a trial of my books, if you subscribe to my newsletter, then you can read a free short story fantasy as well as a free short story romance.
Oh, okay. If people want to reach out to you, what's the best way to do that?
They can reach out on direct message on social media, or my email is Tricia, Tricia, at triciacopeland.com too.
Okay. And people can reach out and they'll, I'm sure, have all sorts of ideas for you.
I love ideas and I love talking to readers about my books.
Yeah, I've written three, and I love getting comments and feedback from people because I get new ideas and new thoughts, and mine are really all about helping to inspire people and so on. So it's always good when people have their observations, whatever they are.
I agree.
Well, anyway, I want to thank you for being here. This has been a lot of fun, and I really value your time being here. And I hope people will reach out and also, more important, get your books and read your books and review them. One of the most important things that all of us who are authors will tell anyone is please review the books. Please go to places like Amazon and Reddit and so on and review the books, because those reviews are viewed and paid attention to by so many people. So giving an author a great review is always a wonderful thing to do.
We do appreciate those. And thank you so much, Michael, for having me.
Well, it's my pleasure, and I want to thank all of you for listening and watching today. We really appreciate it. If you've got any thoughts, I'd love to hear from you. Please email me at Michael, H-I, Michaelhi at accessibe.com. But also go to our podcast page, www.michaelhingson.com/podcast. You can see all of our podcasts there, but they're also available wherever you're listening to podcasts. And you can find them most anywhere podcasts are available. If you know anyone who ought to be a guest that you think would make a wonderful guest and you'd like to have them tell their stories, and Tricia, you as well, I would really appreciate you introducing us, because we're always looking for more people to have on the podcast. And so please don't hesitate to reach out and don't hesitate to provide introductions. But again, give us a 5-star review here on Unstoppable Mindset. We value your reviews greatly, and we really appreciate you doing it. So I want to thank you, Tricia, again for being here. This has been fun. And I think it's really important that people do get a great sense of what you're doing. And I think we've done that. And we're really anxious to see where you go from here.
Thank you so much, Michael. I so appreciate it.